My name is Jamie Piles. I joined Samaritan in December of 1996. We were homeschooling our kids and we were already thinking outside the world's box, if you will. And I saw a little tiny classified ad about this new kind of idea I'd never heard of before. My first reaction was, that's the kind of thing that we would do, isn't it? And so I finally called the number, talked to them, and the more I asked them questions, the more I liked their answers.
Hey y'all, welcome to Cross Politics Live at the Refuge. It's good to be with you guys. You could hoot and holler. I already gave you instructions.
They got cigars in their mouth, so they're like,
Yeah. You can hoot and holler with a cigar. We're live at the Refuge, a new cigar lounge in Moscow, Idaho. So if you're from out of town, make sure when you come in town to make your stop here, get your cigars and your Dr. Pepper. If you guys ever smoked a cigar and Dr. Pepper, it is the best way to have a cigar.
Smokes the Dr. Pepper.
No, you know what I said. You know what I meant.
I know what you said.
When I was 17 years old,
oh no,
and living in the promised land of Texas,
Yeehaw.
Amen. My buddy said you gotta have a Dr. Pepper with your cigar.
17.
17.
Okay.
I was underage. Now 20 is underage. So I mean, goodness, legalist. And so I did it, and I never went back. And then my buddy was at a cigar lounge in Phoenix, Arizona. Walked in, real nice cigar lounge. Walked in, and the guy had Dr. Pepper on tap. My buddy went to the lounge owner and said, "Why do you got Dr. Pepper on tap?" And he said, "And it's free." And he said, "Because if anybody has ever smoked a cigar and Dr. Pepper before, they deserve a free Dr. Pepper." So apparently they got word from me in Dallas to do this in Phoenix. And that's how it goes.
That's how it happened.
I'm a trendsetter at 17 years old.
You're taking credit for that.
Not really, yeah. So tonight's show is, we got the gold guy, Jim Hunter here. We got the Bitcoin guy, Jordan here, and we got the traditionalist, Josiah here.
What do you call yourself? Because you're not a
what
gold,
do we call
Bitcoin,
you?
You're
In this context, I suppose I'm kind of representing traditional finance, but
But the only thing is like
You're the dollar
Bitcoin,
guy.
Bitcoin's been around for about 20 years. Your industry's been around for about 70 years.
Yeah.
And Jim's been around since creation.
right.
Yeah.
not you, Jim.
So it's kind of weird to call you the traditionalist.
Not you. Not-
The youngest guy in the room.
The stonk guy, is that what you're
Stonks. All the stonks, except I can't talk about investing. Yeah.
You're regulated. Okay. So part of the reason why we wanted to do the show is we wanted to talk about money. We're in 2025. Trump's president. In the Biden administration, we were, and I think in a lot of ways, kind of feeling a little defensive. We had, fighting tranny bathrooms in our cities. We were fighting a lot of things in maybe a more defensive position. And now that Trump's elected, we can be offensive, on the offense. And what had happened, I think what is happening, or things I'm seeing, is the day after, I got a friend who's a Second Amendment company, and the day after Trump got elected, his sales tanked, dropped. And so, because all of a sudden all conservatives are feeling like, well, we don't need guns, we don't need ammo, we don't need, bulletproof vests, we got
Nice.
Trump now, right? And then, Trump gets elected, and I think the tendency for conservatives is to be maybe a little more, kind of passive, not as offensive anymore. They don't feel like they're on the defense and having to defend themselves. They can, and conservatives we know can get very apathetic, and that's one of our temptations. And when things are good, and so part of what we want to encourage tonight is, be on the offensive. Think about the parable of the talents. The master gave 1 talent, 2 talents, and 5 talents. And who was the guy that got rebuked in the end? Well, the guy that buried his talents in the backyard.
the preservationist.
The preservationist. And
On the silver standard, mind you.
this is me reading into the fourth guy the master didn't address. The fourth guy was the guy, I think, who was trying to be faithful and invest his money and lost it. I think the master would have withheld the rebuke that he gave the guy who buried his talents in the backyard. He would have asked for his money back. Well, give me my money back. You lost it. But I don't think he would have been rebuked like the guy who buried his talent in the backyard. So the point is that we want to be faithful what God's given us, and sometimes we're going to fail, especially entrepreneurs. We know what failure's like again and again, and we want to be faithful, and we want to get on the offensive when we aren't having all this regulation or having all this cultural societal fights in a way that puts us on the defensive. So that's kind of the big idea behind the show. And so we thought putting together a show with the gold guy and the Bitcoin guy and I guess the traditionalist guy, that we could talk through ways of how we could be on the offensive, ways of how we can invest our money well, ways on how we can grow our business well and so forth, and think like, how can I take the talents that God has given me and make more money? I remember growing up in the church. I was in churches in 5 different states before I moved here. And every time I heard a sermon on, a pastor preach on, business and making money and stuff, usually that sermon, always when growing up, always that sermon from the pulpit was, hey, if you make money, be generous with it and give it away. And never was the sermon about, hey, you need to be faithful with the business God's given you, and you should try to double what you're doing. Make more money with what you're doing. Of course, be faithful and generous. The Bible exhorts rich men to particularly be generous. But growing up in at least my Presbyterian circles and evangelical circles, that was not the message that was given. So part of this is we need to kind of, I think more post-mill, think more biblically, think more long-term about all our jobs and what we're doing here, and ultimately what it means for generations that follow in our generations that follow in our lines and what we're doing with our families. So that's the big idea behind it. So I want to start the first question here. Do you guys want to add anything before we get into the first question?
No, that's good.
Was that okay?
Yeah, that was good, Gabe.
Okay. All right. So I want to start here, and I think I talked to every guy today. I think there's agreement and disagreement, which we really like the disagreement. We like a little bit of sparks flying. So we want that to happen. So really start here. Because there's a big debate on money and currency. What's the difference between money and currency? And we'll get into this more deeper in the long run, but actually first, before we do this, 30 seconds, introduce yourselves. Jim, I'll start with the wiser of the three, with you, and introduce yourself, what you do, and then we'll go to Jordan and then Josiah.
Yeah, the one with the most miles in the odometer. Jim Hunter. I'm from Pensacola, Florida. I am a Christian by the grace of God. I have been in the financial business since 1989. I was institutional fixed income with Merrill Lynch, Lehman Brothers, et cetera. I had, if anyone's familiar with the film The Big Short, my partner and I in the little town of Fairhope, Alabama, had a structured credit hedge fund that was short investment grade credit. We had a great 08. But watching what happened in the resolution, or the classic example of rules for thee and not for me, and watched how that got resolved, eventually that drove me to, this system is essentially corrupt, and how does one deal with that corruption and go forward? And ultimately that led me to gold company I started in 2016. And we specialize in the trading and vaulting of physical gold and silver. And
your company is called?
Alps Precious Metals Group. And we deal with very small individual investors all the way up to multi-billion-dollar corporations and family offices.
Thank you, Jim. And just remind you guys, eat the mic. It's noisy in here, so make sure you eat that mic well.
So you do precious metals and then tobacco pouches. You and Tucker Carlson, Alp. That's how that works. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. So my name is Jordan Bush. I'm the executive director of TGFB Media. We exist to help Christians understand and use Bitcoin for the glory of God and the good of people everywhere. My background is basically.
It's always one.
Yeah. My background is I was a church planting missionary and pastor in Montevideo, Uruguay, and to our surprise, half of our church members were Venezuelan immigrants who had their currency hyperinflated and had to flee to try to find another place to live and try to send money back home to their wives and kids. And so I knew nothing about finance, knew nothing about anything relating to money, really. And so over the course of a number of years, I saw the consequences of denominating your life in a currency that a government can hyperinflate at the drop of a hat. And so 4 years later, I started getting into Bitcoin and trying to understand what it was, and was surprised to learn that Bitcoin was created to be a money that a government couldn't hyperinflate. And so my two worlds kind of overlapped, and I really just started to think about it from that lens, and to think about Bitcoin as a tool, a timely tool that could be leveraged by everyone from normal people and small businesses and nonprofit organizations to provide an alternative to, again, being forced to denominate their lives and their ministries and their businesses solely in something that is completely outside of their control, and that could be and has been leveraged against them for decades. So Bitcoin is this novel thing that's, again, based on ancient, very old principles. And so one of the things you're going to see is that me and Jim have actually a lot in common, which is going to surprise maybe and hopefully not give heart attacks to too many of the gold fans listening at home. But yeah, so that's who we are.
Thank you, Jordan. Josiah?
My name is Josiah Stowe. I am the co-founder of Dominion Wealth Strategists, the only distinctly reformed financial consulting firm, as far as I could tell. There are other people in finance, obviously, that are reformed, but no distinctly reformed financial consulting companies, except, of course, mine. So, with that out of the way, I help the general Calvinistic covenantal confessional congregant deal with money as it is. So I'd like to, instead of trying to help them upend systems, deal with the systems that they currently find themselves in. So how do you deal with your budget? Whether it's denominated in gold or denominated in Bitcoin, you should have one, and you should spend less than you earn. And maybe you should have line items. Dealing with debt as well, since our inflated fiat currency trickled down a whole bunch of government debt, then corporate debt, and now a whole bunch of personal debt. We should probably deal with debt. Because debt is so cheap, so many people are in it, let's help you get out of it. We also help with savings accounts, debt management, life insurance. We even have a health insurance guy now, a tax guy now. We do business coaching, just kind of helping the average Joe deal with finance. From a distinctly reformed point of view, rather specifically a reconstructionist point of view, a little bit more post-millennial, but we are happy to meet you where you're at and deal with reality as it is, not as we would prefer it to be.
So with that in mind, what's the difference between money and currency? Josiah, since you just ended, keep going.
The difference between money and currency, that's actually more their wheelhouse. If you
don't care, do you?
Not particularly,
Right.
actually.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I'm far more interested in distinct and definite application rather than theory, or pure theory, rather. So having read Thank God for Bitcoin on the plane ride here,
Let's
I
go.
know
Okay.
that, well, again, because I listened to it on audiobook, I figured I should give the book a proper read. The first 2/3 of the book is actually on this concept.
Yep.
So I'd say these two are probably the men to ask.
I would give it to Jim. Jim is great on this, so.
Money is three things. It is first a unit of account. How do you measure things? What does this cost versus that
Eat
cost?
your mic.
Sorry.
mic.
I'm eating it. A unit of account. It is a medium of exchange.
What do you mean by unit of account? Sorry.
How much is this? How much is this? How many things does it take to buy this?
Okay, got it.
Okay.
It's free depending on the cell phone company.
Correct. But the service is not. So then it is a medium of exchange. You're a minister. He's a money manager. How do you, you both do labor. How do you swap that to get things to swap between each other?
Okay.
Currencies can do both of those things.
They
What money does.
measure and exchange.
Right.
Medium.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does both of those things.
Okay.
The one thing that money does that currencies don't do is that they are a store of value, and I would go further to say they're a store of labor. And what happens when you have governments or any entity that does something with currencies to devalue those currencies, what they've essentially done is debauched your labor.
Right.
Because you work 12 hours a day trying to take care of your parish and the flock you shepherd.
Right.
You work 12 hours a day trying to take guys
16.
that don't know any how 14, 16. But if some other entity does something to this store, because what did I do? I stored my labor in something so that we can make every transaction easy. My claim is, therefore, dollars, yen, euros, Swiss francs, whatever you want to use, they are no longer money because there is nothing that keeps them honest relative to valuing the labor that was stored in this thing that allows us to make economic transactions.
So to clarify, you're saying the exchange side of it is currency, the labor, quantifying the labor side of it is money.
Correct. And that's what the dollar used to be, but is no longer.
When it was on a gold or silver standard.
That's correct.
Okay.
And and why Bitcoin can work in this too is because Bitcoin is essentially intangible gold. What is Bitcoin? It is something that is a limited quantity. That can't be made more of, and if an entity prints more currency, Bitcoin, it goes one direction. So does gold.
But isn't the value of Bitcoin somewhat dependent on dollars?
No.
Oh, look! I love that we have the gold guy and the stonks guy like defending Bitcoin. This is great. I mean, but no,
You're winning already.
Exactly. Yeah. But no. So again, this is one of the most counterintuitive things is when people think about Bitcoin, it just seems so ephemeral. It just seems so, arbitrary, the value of it.
Zeros and ones.
Exactly. And so people just think you can just create money out of thin air. And in reality, Bitcoin, very similar to gold, there's only two ways to get Bitcoin. You either basically spend money to buy real world computers that then work and operate on real world energy. You either do that process and then you pay people to service them.
And that's what they call the mining process.
Exactly, mining.
Okay.
So basically, there's real world inputs, real world scarce inputs that go into mining Bitcoin, or you purchase it from somebody who's already done that process. So unlike fiat currency, where a central bank or a government can take the same piece of paper and put a 1 on it, and then another piece of identical paper and put 100 on it, and for some reason this is now worth 100 times more than this. With Bitcoin, the fixed inputs are part of the driver of the price of it. Now, at the same time, what is anything worth? It's worth what someone is willing to pay for it. And part of the reason that Bitcoin is so volatile is because Bitcoin gives you back if you're trying to move it into a fiat currency, it gives you what you want whenever you want it. So whereas things like if you're trying to sell a house, you have to wait for someone to come along who has enough money to buy that house. There's certain days when houses are, when house selling businesses are open and when they're closed. There's different constraints. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's a 24/7, 365 market. There's at any time around the world you can find someone who's willing and able to buy your Bitcoin. So because of that, it is much more quickly. It gives people what they want and need, and so because it's so good at doing that, the price is at this point especially it fluctuates a lot more. So
okay, before I tear that up, I want to go back
Bring
to the original question again, but maybe give me some Bible verses behind what is money. I'm trying to think as we're talking, like what could I lay my foundation on to find money and tie it to scriptures.
There is gold in the land of Havilah.
Hallelujah.
And the gold of that land is good.
Very good. There's two people on the face of the earth, and we need a medium of exchange for them to transact transactions. Kind of important there.
So are you saying, like, gold is intrinsically valuable because God said it was?
That's what I say.
That's my claim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intrinsic value versus subjectivist value versus labor value. We can get into the nitty gritty here, but again, I'm not a theory guy, so I'm going to get bored.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the biggest misunderstandings is the concept of intrinsic value. Okay, so like, there's no thing that has intrinsic.
Real quick, are you responding to my comments about gold has intrinsic value
Yes.
because God said?
I am. So yes.
Okay.
Because again,
So-
at any point, so for like right now, if you were to go out and try to buy an ounce of gold, gold's price is about $3,400 an ounce. Okay, so now if you look at the price of gold over time, like there's the price of gold is being artificially suppressed by in our case the United States government. So actually gold's price should be way higher than it is right now, all things being equal. But because of the constraints and different ways that the United States is operating, it's actually suppressing something that should be far more valuable.
Would you apply those same comments to Bitcoin? Like Bitcoin should be way higher right now?
So it's not, I would say the United States hasn't made a specific policy suppressing the price of gold. I'm sorry, the price of Bitcoin. It actually actively is doing that with the price of gold. So a lot of the United States gold is denominated. How much is they're fixing the price at like $42 an ounce?
That's what's on the balance. That's what's on the balance sheet. But
Yeah.
Scott Bessent and Trump are both saying that's going to stop.
Yeah. So this is the weirdest thing. I promise this sounds absurd. This sounds absurd, but basically, in terms of the value of the United States gold on the balance sheet, they are pricing it at $42 an ounce, which was its value. Like, I mean, what 80? Yeah, long time ago. And so and they're just declaring that this is the value of gold. Every other nation on earth was doing something similar, and everybody except for us, if I'm not mistaken, has taken the totally logical step of revaluing their gold according to the actual market price of it. And so in reality, why would they do that? Why would the United States do that? Because if they reprice gold according to its actual market value, it would do damage to people's confidence in the dollar, because it would be an admission that they've been suppressing this thing for a really long time.
Wow.
So it's a whole absurd thing that is going on that doesn't make any sense. So,
But gold is intrinsically valuable because God said so.
okay, but the issue is, what is the intrinsic value of gold? Like, are you talking about its price is intrinsically? There's a certain price at which gold is intrinsically valuable?
No. You would say the intrinsic value is God's word. Why does he say in the second chapter of Genesis, before the fall, there's gold in the land of Havilah, and the gold of that land is good? Why is he telling us that? Well, he's going to end up telling us in Proverbs and Psalms that it is the standard by which wisdom is greater than fine gold. A good name is better than fine gold. But so what's gold?
Yeah.
God has declared this thing, which in the course of time, man finds out, oh, well, it happens to be very scarce in the Earth's crust. It takes a while to get it out.
Yeah.
And then when you do get it out, oh my gosh, you can pour acid on it, nothing happens to it. Look at the construction of the tabernacle. Look at what goes on the vestiture of the priesthood. Look what goes in the temple. It is clearly something that God pulled out of all the elements that are on the earth and said, this thing is going to be a standard by which things are judged.
Right. I got a practical question here, because I don't want to step over this, but you said gold is being suppressed by the government, and you're saying Trump's administration might unshackle that.
Correct.
So are you saying, like, right now might be a good time to buy gold, because if Trump does unshackle that, it'll go up to whatever market value it's supposed to be at?
It's yes, but the unshackling is functionally related to the fact that you have the BRICS countries that are looking at, okay, well, if we have a risk of our assets being held in dollars being confiscated, which is exactly what the Europeans are talking about doing relative to the Ukrainian situation, oh, fine, we'll just take their stuff. Well, they're like, well, no, we're not doing that anymore, so therefore we'll form our own currency. And what's one of the first things Trump said when he got into office? One of the very first things he said is, don't go messing around with the U.S. dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. Okay, so he makes the claim, but what's he doing in the background to do something about that? And I think the answer is he is going to, not only with gold, but also with Bitcoin. There's no question Bessent is a Bitcoin guy. That what you're going to, I think what they're, and Lord willing, this will come to pass, they will do something where it's some sort of a basket, some sort of something which keeps the dollar honest and prevents, let's say Congress, but certainly a socialist congressman, communist congressman, from turning this thing into a state-run monster.
Are you saying that he's in some way trying to return to some kind of standard?
Correct.
Some kind of gold,
Correct.
precious metals, Bitcoin standard of some
And
sort.
they're recognizing that Bitcoin, because of a 16-year existence now? 16 years in existence, it went from zero to $88,000 per Bitcoin. And you've got a very tight, on a relative scale, a tight market. We do need to talk about the volatility of Bitcoin right now relative to its store of value. But yes, that's where I think they're going.
Okay.
And that would be a great, great thing, not only for the United States, but for the world.
So,
period.
so real quick, I want to ask our audience, just by show of hands, who's invested in Bitcoin? Raise your hand. Who's invested in gold? Raise your hand. Who's invested with traditionalists? Bunch of papists. Helpful, thanks. I just wanted to kind of see who was in our audience.
Call you a papist?
So now the problem I have with, I understand your argument from Genesis. Makes a lot of sense. I understand your argument from, hey, we're just dealing with the cards we're dealt. Kind of pragmatic, kind of pragmatic argument. Bitcoin, to me, the one question I've always had, and I've never really heard a good answer from Bitcoin,
Get ready.
is why is it not fiat money? Just like our dollar.
So just like this, like I mentioned with gold, just like gold, there's a production cost to Bitcoin. There's no way you can get Bitcoin for free unless you get it as a gift. If somebody gifts it to you, then you can get it for free. But there is a fixed production cost for Bitcoin. You can't, like, there, you have to pay for the price of energy, for the price of, you have to pay the price for these Bitcoin mining computers. You have to pay people to fix them and maintain them.
So I understand that.
Yeah.
What do you
But
pay
what
them
if
with?
what if Gabe came up with Gabe's coin,
Sure.
had a fixed formula for it,
Sure.
copy the Bitcoin methodology,
Yeah.
and it never takes off?
Sure.
What's the difference between Gabe's coin and Bitcoin?
Yeah, so again, you have to have demand for something. Like again, and there's characteristics. Basically, the fact that you can create a coin doesn't mean anything. Like theoretically, there's no reason that I can't start a shoe company that will eventually compete with Nike.
So the only difference is that Bitcoin started first, and people started to give it value because demand came along.
So yes, people recognize, they're like, okay, first of all, almost nobody thought that Bitcoin was going to reach a point where it would be held, where the most powerful nation on earth would hold a strategic reserve of only Bitcoin. Like that was a fever dream for a lot of people. A lot of people just thought this is a cool experiment. It was built on 40 years of cryptography and work, in philosophical work, of an attempt, basically people trying to come up with an e-cash, like a digital way to send value across the internet. In the same way that you can send information to anybody around the world, they tried to figure out some way to do this, and Bitcoin is the culmination of that, where they actually succeeded in doing this. And so,
Wherein my concern is that there's more to money and currency than pure scarcity and utility, because that's just a pure subjectivist view on currency and money. If it's not backed by anything what we might call intrinsically valuable, then I'm concerned it's not fiat in the sense that the dollar is fiat, but you are still declaring something that God has not called valuable, and are setting a price based on pure utility. Pure demand and utility.
Is the intrinsic value its security, though?
it's security. So again, it's just the terms that you're using are tricky. But like basically, yeah. So Bitcoin has value.
We're normal people.
It's fine. It totally makes sense. Yeah. Bitcoin's value comes from a number of things. Okay. So one of the things is there's only 21 million of them. There are 60 million millionaires in the world. There's not enough for every millionaire to own one. Okay. So people.
So you want some poor people and some rich people.
No, I don't want that. There's
communists. Communists.
You will always have the poor with you. Don't worry. That's a
promise.
promise.
Every Bitcoin can be. This is one of the places that that Bitcoin is superior to gold. Is one of the reasons that the world moved to a bimetal system where you have gold and silver is that you can't fractionalize gold very well. Like to get like a usable, if you're going to try to buy an orange and one orange's worth of gold, it's going to be very difficult. Yeah, and so with Bitcoin, every Bitcoin can be divided into 100 million fractions, and so you can buy a penny's worth of Bitcoin. You can buy a nickel's worth of Bitcoin or whatever. So Bitcoin is hyper divisible, and so you can use it for very small transactions as well as very large transactions. So,
Jim, if I work with you, I could give you $5.75 and buy gold. Can I buy fractional gold? Basically, is what I'm getting
minus
at.
the brokerage fee.
Yeah, it's going to be hefty for $5.
You get 25 cents.
Yeah, right. For $5.75, no.
I'm just making up some sort of fractional way of trying to buy gold. That's all I'm trying to do.
And again, it goes back to if you have what was the United States dollar? The United States dollar was something where I could take, fine, if that's what you're going to do as a government, then here's your dollar, I want the gold back.
And you're saying that's the dollar was originally meant to fraction gold.
Correct. That's what it did do.
Represents
You have the
gold.
It's what?
It's meant to represent gold rather than fractionalize it.
Correct.
And part of that also comes down to the fact that like gold, nobody wants to lug around a lot of gold. Because again, a very small coin of gold is worth a lot of money. And so if you're to lose it or someone is to steal it, like you just don't want to do that. And so gold's physicality, which is one of the things that I talk to people all the time. People are like, I don't like Bitcoin because it's not tangible. And that makes sense. There's certain threat models for which the tangibility is an asset. But in the case of, again, as one example, our Venezuelan brothers and sisters, they had to flee the country on foot, walk across a border. And so for them, there were lots of criminals, including government-sanctioned criminals that are called soldiers, who knew that people were leaving with all their valuables. And so they were looking for people who had things that looked heavy to go steal from them. And so in Bitcoin's case, I can memorize a 12-word seed phrase that holds $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, cross any border in the world. Nobody even knows I have it. I get to the country where I'm going. I download an app on my phone, plug in 12 words, and I have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin that I can do whatever I want to with.
What if they steal your phone?
So then you don't need a phone. You can get another phone, like all these things. Like
With what money?
Again, you can basically tell people, you negotiate with them, whatever. But again, these aren't real problems. Like these are. I know you're just messing. But.
So when you talk about threat models, you're saying that like the dollar's threat model is what? The fiat, for the most part.
Well, the fact that the government is programmed, even if you believe them, that the official inflation rate is or the CPI or whatever is 2%, which is a bold-faced lie. If you actually look at the
especially this last year,
100%,
27%.
Yeah, it's very high. So if you just take them at their word that it's only that percentage, they're still saying that over the course of whatever 100 divided by this is 2%. So over the course of 20 years, they're going to devalue all your purchasing power. So they're telling you in front, like this is what we're doing if you hold dollars. So that's certainly one threat model. Another one would be, again, you mentioned somebody diabolical like Russia or some of these places. There's places around the world that have been cut off from the SWIFT system for one reason or the other. I've got an acquaintance who works in the Middle East, works at a seminary. His country that he operates in can't use dollars. His missions organization can't send him dollars. They can send him Bitcoin. So they send him Bitcoin. He turns around and finds a secondary market of normal people who are trying to move out of and into from their local currency into Bitcoin. And so he's able to do that relatively easily.
Because it's an international currency,
Yes.
roughly,
Yep.
like
It's-
gold would be
Yes,
at some
it's
level.
unlike national currencies, which are functionally intranets. There's limited on and off ramps. Bitcoin is basically a monetary internet, and so you can send that to anybody who has internet around the world.
Okay, so I've known about this, but talking about it further today at lunch, it seems like there's kind of this pragmatic view of American economy, money, et cetera, and then there's this first principle view of money. Let's maybe, I know you guys you're more on the pragmatic side, you're on the first principle side. Maybe define what you mean. I don't care who. Define what you mean by first principle view of money.
The first thing I would say is, so you could do this same conversation about ministry, right? There are churches that are very pragmatic. They talk about, like, we want to help real people in real ways.
He just called you seeker sensitive.
That's right. You're seeker sensitive. That's right.
Yeah,
I'm
So,
a
like-
Everest and an evangelical.
Okay, so papist, seeker sensitive, traditionalist.
So let's take it in the most charitable route. Like, there's people who really see problems that people have, and they want to help them. And there's honor. That's honorable to a certain degree. And so, but if you were to say, listen, I don't want to get involved in all that theology stuff. I just want to get down to the pragmatic things. We automatically recognize as theological, wise people. We recognize, well, that's deficient. That's only going to get you so far. The question is, what is motivating you? Why do these things matter? Why are you trying to help people? And so if you only live under the sun, okay, if you're just looking at things in terms of their earthbound reality, you're missing an entire half of the great commandment, which is you're supposed to be motivated by honoring God. And so what God is an actual person who has specific desires of how the world ought to work and things that please him. And so one of the things that Jim and I would both talk about is when you look at the scriptures, there's tons. It's shocking. If I were to ask you, what is something that the scriptures call an abomination? There's probably a lot of things that leap to mind, okay? And we could all name them, and those are correct, right? But one of the things that the Proverbs calls an abomination is an unjust weight and balance.
Yep.
So this is like a way to measure the value of something. And now this could be a legal system. That's one type of weight and measure. But a currency or a type of money is a weight and measure. You're measuring out the value of one thing versus another. And throughout time, wicked rulers have always tried to stretch the meaning and make fuzzy what is money. And so again, if you have something where you start out with a currency that or a unit of measure, a monetary unit of measure that's 100% gold, and this is understood. All right, so our currency is 100% gold coins. Over time, no government has been able to withstand the temptation to add a small amount of a baser metal, so a bronze or a copper. Yes, exactly. They haven't been able to withstand that. And so they do this, and then over time you end up, all right, they're secretly doing this. So we're going to do 98% gold with 2%. And then over time it gets to the point where the entire currency is this base, more worthless metal.
So are you saying that first principles are trying to get at, let's say, the objective reality of how God views money? Is that what you're saying?
And I would, only thing I would add is
Please.
I would say the first principle is we are under the curse. And since we're under the curse, we've got to be held accountable. And the only thing that keeps men accountable when it comes to money is some sort of a standard.
Some sort of objective
Correct.
standard. Yeah.
And why did I gravitate to gold after, as I described in the opening comments, the most ridiculous quote unquote fix, which was not a fix in 08, 09. It was guys who should be in barrels selling pencils in Midtown New York are flying around in private jets today. They shouldn't be, but they are. And it's because one of the primary reasons they're not is because we've got this ridiculous non-tethered currency which allows them to do this. And so first principles would say never set up a money system, an economic system that there will not be one that's pleasing to God, because you're going to end up with unbalanced measures, and therefore you got to go back to first principles to do that right.
And just to make it really plain too, when we're talking about unjust measures, what we're talking about is theft.
Correct.
So
absolutely.
Taxation.
This very obscure Old Testament principle, the eighth commandment.
I just want to say it very, very plainly. Like, what we're talking about is stealing.
Yes.
And so, and that's forbidden. It's eighth commandment. But that's what's happening. Is the value of our labor, the value of our savings, that's being stolen from us.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
And this is where this kind of crystallized for me. So I was a pastor. I'd been in Bitcoin for like 6 months, like studying it and trying to understand it. I was in the book of Galatians doing sermon prep. And in the end of the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul, he says that God is not mocked, for what a man sows, that will he also reap. And so we had a bunch of new Christians in our church, and I'm trying to figure out how do I rephrase this in a way that they can understand. And so I was like, okay, so God has so hardwired this principle of sowing and reaping into the fabric of the universe that to deny it is to mock him. And so I started to think about, okay, so if this is so obvious, like what are examples of this? And immediately the first thing that came to mind was from the book of Thessalonians, where these new Christians are thinking, look, Jesus is coming back, so we don't have to work anymore. And Paul, in the strongest terms, says, no. If one isn't willing to work, then neither should he eat. So Paul is saying the point of food is to give you energy to work. And if you're not willing to steward that food and the energy it gives you effectively, then you shouldn't eat. And if you deny sowing and reaping in this way for long enough, you'll die. And so this is one of these examples and so again, you could go through over and over again a whole bunch of different examples. Sexuality has a logic to it. Logic itself is based on sowing and reaping. If this, then this. And then, go ahead.
So, Josiah, here's my question.
Yeah.
So, based on what they're saying about first principles, Do you agree with that first principles idea, concept?
You believe in God?
I do.
Okay.
Eighth commandment definitely in there.
Probably feeling a little depressed about the
You
Pope
good with
right
the eighth
now.
commandment?
Yeah. I suppose my primary, focus here is it's not that first principles are unimportant. It's that for the average Joe, it's not pressing, we might say. Or it's not temporally immediately pressing. When he goes to work and gets paid in dollars, it's not as if he should spend his entire day wondering, oh no, I'm earning dollars instead of Bitcoin. I should definitely be convicting my boss to pay me in this different denomination in order for me to go home and feed my family. What he's concerned with is the livelihood. And livelihood, unfortunately, now in the air that we breathe, is based on is within the ocean of a fiat currency. So we need to first swim, get our heads above water, deal with reality as it is, and then once you have your budget, all your ducks in a row, and we have enough people with their heads above water to take that more systematic approach, then we can start talking about what to do with those first principles. So I'm glad that these guys are doing that deep work. My focus just happens to be, what do we do with the system we currently have?
Okay, so let's say that I have been working for the last 25 years and have $50,000 or $60,000 or $100,000 of stored up money. What I don't want to happen over the next 20 years is that $50,000 or $100,000 turns into $10,000, right? So first principles start to matter real quick about all my labor that's stored up. So then if I come to you and I say, all right, you're the Dominion wealth guy, how do I make sure, do I need to buy gold? Do I need to buy Bitcoin? What do I do with this type of investment so that it's not devalued over time?
Right, and that depends, because when we're talking about...
Because that's a first principle issue, right?
Right, when we're talking about stores of value and actual investments, because there is a distinction. If you were to, say, buy gold, you are storing value. You are not investing. You're not growing anything.
But gold goes up.
Gold goes up in relation to the dollar because the dollar goes down with regards to actual value. So if you're trying to put your money to work, you don't put it into a store of value. You don't buy a bunch of things that are what we call like static, non-productive assets.
Unless it's ammo or guns.
Ammo or guns are great when we're talking about like a Mad Max type scenario.
Okay, I'm just saying we're getting close.
That's a great hedge against what we might call like systematic failure. But if you're trying to grow your wealth, then it should be in a productive asset class. So gold and Bitcoin are both great if we're talking about hedges or stores of value long term. But if you're wanting to grow, then owning parts of legitimately productive companies is a really great way to make sure that your value is not tied to the dollar so much as it is tied to the legitimately productive assets behind those companies.
The problem is or gold has existed before dollars ever did. So
Yes,
to try to tie the value of gold to dollars makes no sense.
Right, which I would generally agree. So, but if you're going to have a store of value, certainly cash is trash. That's going to devalue at minimum 3%, probably closer to like 9 to 27. So if you're going to put your money somewhere, owning a thing that makes you more money, even if that money is dollars, as long as you make more dollars than the dollars are devalued, you end up with a bigger pile of fiat nothingness that you can trade for actual goods and services.
Yeah, but Josiah, what happens when we get '08, and if the classic all correlations go to 1, which means there is no asset that rises. And so I've quote unquote put my money to work,
right?
And nothing works, that's what '08 was.
Housing market,
or housing. Look at the Great Depression.
Right.
We're talking all assets down 90%, except for a handful, and one of that handful was gold mining companies.
Yeah.
Right. So all I would argue back to you is, to anybody in the room, anybody I talk to, I'm like, I'm not saying light your hair on fire, sell every asset that you have, buy only Bitcoin and gold,
right,
and run to the hill over there in
well
Moscow.
Diversified is.
I'm
is
saying,
the way to go.
take what has been over time. What's the number? What's the blue suit off the rack for a guy like yourself to say, look, I want workable assets. We want da da da. But before we do that, like if I'm going to build a home, I've got to lay the foundation first.
Right.
What's the foundation? The foundation is core capital that I'm not going to try to grow, but I'm going to have that as the foundation of my financial house. that is gold and Bitcoin.
Yes,
and
and I
then
would
you
actually
go to
agree.
town. You go to town with the other
Yeah, so
whatever
a
the
solid,
percentage
A
is.
solid like minimum 10% hedge is wise. We see the pearl of great price, the treasure buried in the field. Apparently, it was not uncommon practice to take a large store of value and bury it when, again, that store of value was not something that deflates or inflates, right? You can't change the gold, the silver, the pearl. And so when you came back after the thief has come or destroyed, or the nation has come and conquered your territory, you can dig it back up and start from not from scratch, right? You can actually rebuild. So there is definitely a time and a place for that store, for that hedge. But if you're trying to be productive and take the Dominion mandate seriously, which I'm not saying you guys don't,
Right.
Because you're not suggesting that we invest 100% in
No.
your asset classes either.
No.
But that the asset class that you do have as a hedge should actually function as a hedge. And then when you do move that money into more productive asset classes, that they should be legitimately productive based on biblical principles, not, active management as if that's something productive, which the U.S. tries to pretend it is.
Right.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things, there's a time for everything under the sun. Okay, there's a time to live, there's a time to die. So even if you just examine that, there's a time to do the thing that under other circumstances would be the exact opposite of what you ought to do. Right, like you have Proverbs 26, 4 and 5. Imagine you're sitting here, you're like, man, I've got this fool I work with. Like, how should I answer this fool? And you read Proverbs 26, 4, and it's like, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And you're thinking, praise God, I have wisdom from on high. You
got
go to
the
close
answer.
your Bible, and you read the very next verse, which says, don't answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. And you think to yourself, wait a second, this seems to be completely contradictory. And so what you're, again, it's like the very thing that would connotate faithfulness in one situation is unfaithfulness in the other. And so again, none of us are saying that you shouldn't you shouldn't invest in productive businesses, or that you shouldn't own gold, or you shouldn't own Bitcoin. We're saying, hey, there's a time, like you have to be a man of Issachar, to quote one of your own prophets. You ought to be a man of Issachar who figures out what is going on. Like what are the specific threats and pressures, and what are things to invest in given those constraints in order to be a wise steward.
Just go ahead. I want to hear your response to that. Do you have, unless you don't have one?
Good.
Okay. Okay. So then the question, the real debate is about what time is it, right? Is that where everything really is? Like, so
Yes.
And it's a different time for every person, which is why I don't like blanket advice. The man who has capital to deploy, who has assets that are tied up in fiat nonsense, should probably have a hedge, a large one. And for the one who's barely getting by, I don't think putting a sizable portion of his already stretched assets into a theoretical first principles sort of product, that's the wrong word, currency, money, store of value, is probably going to be a good idea. If he's barely putting food on the table, I don't think he needs to worry about how's Bitcoin doing right now? How's gold doing right now? I think he just needs to focus on putting food on his table, and the way he happens to be able to do that right now is with dollars.
And I think there's wisdom in that. But the problem is there's a massive blind spot that I'm sympathetic to, but you're talking from like an American standpoint, okay? There are billions of people around the world whose national currencies are way more volatile than Bitcoin.
Right, but I deal with Americans.
That's fine. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm not saying you're totally wrong. What I'm saying is, look, what the problem is, there's a massive global market for a monetary unit that is less volatile than their local currency, and Bitcoin is that for many people. And again, gold definitely is that. So what we're not saying, again, we're not enemies here. We're basically saying there are time constraints. There's situations in which you do that. There's situations in which you do this. And there's situations in which you go with Bitcoin. So again, the question is just figuring out like what are my specific constraints. And what are the threat models that I'm most aware of, or that are most germane to my situation? I had the privilege to interview Pastor Wilson about a year and a half ago, and one of the things that I said to him, I was like, I've been thinking about Moscow and you guys in relation to Bitcoin for years. And I said to them, like, we live in a world in which you could say something insane like you can't lop off a little boy's penis to make him a girl, and that can get you debanked from your bank. And so I said to him, hey, if you were to be debanked from your bank tomorrow, how would you pay your staff? How would you send money to your missionaries? All these kind of things. And so again, I'm not saying you put all of your money into Bitcoin for this, but there's uses and value propositions for Bitcoin that have nothing to do with trying to get rich quickly. Like this is a real real world threat in the world we live in, and Bitcoin is valuable in situations like that.
And as a stopgap, there's a Baptist credit union in Southern California.
Correct. Right. And so again, it's yes, absolutely. Again, we're not enemies here. I'm just saying that great. Hopefully that works. There's a guy named Gavin Newsom in California who's not not very friendly to things like this.
There's a Methodist credit union in South Dakota.
Yes, and so again, I don't disagree with any of this. You just named two things.
But Methodist.
That's the problem.
He's a Catholic, so.
You just named two
There's
things
no
in a country of
Presbyterian
380 million people.
Yet.
So wait, are you making an argument though that if we were to engage where we were currently at, we probably wouldn't have to use Bitcoin? Is that are you making that argument?
I'm not sure.
Well, because he's making a point that listen, there's potential turmoil in people's purchasing abilities, right, to do something with, and you're making the argument that there's other places outside of Bitcoin to go and give your energy to be able to make purchases. Is that what I'm understanding?
Of sorts, only because Bitcoin isn't as widely adopted as the dollar. So if and when it is the widely adopted currency and you can use it just as easily as dollars, it's a superior medium of exchange and could certainly be a superior store of value. My concern is that it is not now. So from a more pragmatic, more Catholic and evangelical point of view, that most people need to deal with the medium of exchange that is the lingua franca of finance right now, which happens to be the dollar, with hefty room for hedging against the dollar with assets that are not the dollar.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Let's take your example of the small Christian client of yours. He's got $50,000 in net worth. If I'm following you, you're saying let's put $5,000 of that, maybe 2,500 in Bitcoin, 2,500 in gold or silver, and the rest of it that you would invest, right?
Potentially, because for most of our clients, it's, at least at the moment, better to use the dollar as the unit of accounting, just for pragmatic purposes. So if we were to, hypothetically, since I'm not actually currently attempting to get anyone to buy securities, if they were to put their money into a Bitcoin, gold, or silver tracked ETF that follows the value of that asset class perfectly, then it's still denominated in dollars. They can still pull it out. It's still a relatively liquidatable asset. And they don't have to change up and add another burdensome mathematical equation to their asset classes.
Yeah, but in that case, you gave them a financial contract. You did not give them. You gave them something that tracked it.
Right.
And that's great as long as we're not in any sort of a tail risk situation.
What are we, Baptists, terrified that the system's going to fail?
Oh no! I'm a pragmatic Presbyterian.
Yeah, I'm the only Baptist here. So
We'll drown you later.
yeah, we're not retreatists. So we want to reform and refine the systems in place. Which again, if the U.S. dollar eventually became backed by gold or backed by Bitcoin, that solves our primary issue. The
Correct.
first principles are solved, and we didn't have to change our unit of accounting.
Right, but that is where we are right now. In that you gotta have.
But you still got to work in that world.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are. It's like that's where we are.
Right, but I'm saying an ETF is not the same thing as owning Bitcoin or gold outright.
Functionally, very, very, really not.
Yeah.
But for the sake of just hedging, just making sure that your current unit of accounting does not devalue to the point of unusability. It tracks those things perfectly and can, hopefully, mitigate the switching cost when we do move to a different system of currency.
Yeah, here's the issue. All of us understand that we have to operate on multiple time horizons. Like all of us have to live in the world today and pay our bills and do all kinds of stuff today. And yet all of us also have to live to a certain degree, as much as it's helpful, like thinking about the future and planning for the future underneath the sovereignty of God. And so one of the things that when I talk to people, I find is the biggest misunderstanding about money. For a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people even today, where they're like, hey, when will Bitcoin grow up? When will Bitcoin be mature, okay, to the point that it'll have all three of these characteristics of money that Jim talked about? It'll be a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. And so one of the most helpful frameworks that I use when I talk to people to try to help them get this point is thinking about children. Okay? So here's the deal. If you never deal with the volatility of children, you'll never receive the benefit that adults give you. When you have children, you price in the volatility to your time and to their behavior for having children. Okay, and so your life looks different when you have children than when it looks like when you have teenagers and when it looks like you have old men or whatever it is. So if I were to ask you, do babies bear the image of God? You'd say yes. Now, if I asked you, do 25-year-old men bear the image of God in a more true sense or in a different, greater way than babies do? You'd go, well, yeah, because like older men can work to provide for families and work to provide for other people. And then if I said to you, is a 60-year-old man, does he bear the image of God? Maybe even if this isn't the best way to phrase this, like, does he bear the image of God in an even truer sense because he's got the wisdom of age and all these kind of things? You'd say, well, yeah. And so right now, like, Bitcoin is functionally a teenager. It's 16 years old. And so obviously 16-year-olds are a little bit more volatile than old men under most circumstances. But if you don't adopt babies or young people, you'll never get who they turn into. And there's benefits that young people and that babies have that older guys don't have. And so all I'm trying to say is you shouldn't be trying to wait for this perfect moment in the future, because that's not how God has designed the normal world to work. Right. God has ways and he has means, and Bitcoin is just one representation of that.
Right. And if, to strengthen your point, if you were to invest in your children when they're not worth much and they suddenly become worth $400,000 a piece, your early on minor investment is going to, quote unquote, pay dividends for a long, long time. So it'd be wise to, if you think something's going to go to the moon, maybe hitch part of your net worth to it in order to ride that wave up.
And then the flip side of it, when they're being bad teenagers, right? Then you've got to have something that responds to chaos, and that's what gold does. If you look at every time that gold's had a major league rise, I'll give you one data point. When the planes hit the towers on September 11, 2011, gold was trading at $275 an ounce. Today it's $3,400. What have we had for 24 years? It's chaos. It's the United States. What is it? Are we off the rails? Are we on them? Are we leading? Are we it is reflected in the gold price. Let me go quickly back to the example I wanted to ask you about, the individual. So think of that individual, but now think of the individual as a collective of all the people that are members of Christ Church Moscow, or pick your church wherever. My biggest fear, and I think it's yours too, is that our brothers and the brothers that are elders in churches do not understand what's going to happen. Right now, everything's great. We got Christians on our side for the most part that are in Washington that are trying to get the thing fixed. The problem is what happens when Saruman takes it over again and the orcs are running the show again. And this time when and we have another financial crisis. First Presbyterian of Omaha has faithful little guys, quote unquote. They've been giving their tithes for 25 years. They've built up a $20 million building fund. We're about to break ground. Financial crisis. Oh my gosh, it's written into the Dodd-Frank law in Title II that if we go into that again, we're not going to burden the taxpayers. No, what are we going to do? We're going to bail in the deposits of the high net worth guys. Guess who's going to be a high net worth guy? A church that thinks their elder board is going, we're going to be conservative. We're just going to buy 6-month CDs. I'm like, guys, that is not conservative. You are exposed yourself to a corrupt system that doesn't like us. They like us okay right now, but the minute the wrong guys get into the controls, and again, I'm just saying, be wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove. I'm not saying turn every penny of a church's treasury into gold. I'm saying,
but you like that.
No, I wouldn't, because then they'd be offsides the other way.
You got you.
I'm just saying, don't be foolish and think that everything's going to be okay and we'll sail through. You won't.
You're saying, though, if a church has a large amount of money
yes,
that they
building
want to
fund.
protect,
Correct.
that's where you need to put it in some kind of place where it is safe.
Bitcoin, gold.
Right, but churches don't have a lot of money. They have a lot of debt. Well,
Unless
actually, you're the Episcopalian. Your churches have a lot of
I
money. The Baptist world, we have a lot of debt.
love it. But seriously, you know, when you hit the $250,000 mark, anything over that in church coffers has to be protected in some form or fashion.
That's good. I hear you, Josiah, saying, I hear you. I mean, I think there are a number of people who have been faithful, who have resources, and need to talk to guys like Jim and Josh. But a lot of people in our churches have not been faithful. A lot of people in our churches have inherited debt. They have credit card debts.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
college loans, and they're in terrible places. And some of them are still upside down in terms of they're spending more than they make. And you're thinking, in that sense, you're still thinking in terms of first principles. But the first principle is you need to work and you need to provide for yourself. You need to pay your own bills. You need to pay your own way. And you've got to do that first before you have anything to even begin working with.
Correct.
And most people woefully underestimate the amount of money that they should have before they start deploying their capital. Like, you should have at least 1 month's worth of expenses in advance in your checking account before you open up your savings account.
Dave Ramsey says 6.
That's your checking. Your savings should have at least half as much at the same bank for liquidity purposes.
Well,
and then like 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months, depending on your situation, because blanket advice is trash.
Yeah.
So most people need, like, again, ideally like a year's salary in liquid assets. I would say in a bank, but in something similarly liquidatable before they ever start thinking about what lands to conquer, where to deploy their capital. They haven't even rebuilt the walls yet.
And that's a basic principle of dominion.
Yep.
Because you can't begin taking dominion beyond your house until you are actually providing for your house.
Right. It's concentric. You have to take care of yourself because you can't pour from an empty cup. Then you have to take care of your family because he who does not provide for his household is worse than an unbeliever.
Right.
Then
Deny
you
the
take
faith.
care of your business. You take care of your church. You take care of your community. And then maybe send money across the sea to that missionary organization you're overfunding.
And he who is faithful in little then will be faithful in much.
Right. And will be set over much.
Yeah, exactly. So that all works together. And so you're not. It's Gabe's been calling you the pragmatist behind your back, and I just want you to know that. And but I don't think that's pragmatic. I don't think that's pragmatism. It's just a different first principle. The first principle is first you got to pay your own way. First you got to work hard with your own hands, pay your own bills, and then you'll have something to give to those who are in need. Then you'll have something to invest. Then you'll have something to build with.
And if your employer is willing to pay you in a different kind of currency, a different kind of money, so be it. As long as you can also then use that type of currency, that type of money to provide for those first principles.
But Toby, here's where Josiah is different. If you go look at, if we went down the street and looked at the Edward Jones guy or whoever they are, right? There've been statistics taken. It's something on the order of 98% of them would say absolutely no way to Bitcoin, absolutely no way to physical gold. Mm-hmm. They are actively telling you don't do it. Mm-hmm. Now these guys
Why is that, Jim? Why is that?
Well, it's a function of the fact that they are paid to gather assets, and if you take assets down because you put them in Bitcoin or put them in gold, the revenue for their revenue went down. Now the good guys are like Dominion. The good guys are going, now wait a second, yeah, we might lose some assets under management, but we are actually doing the right thing by our clientele by saying, no, you've got to have some sort of a solid grounding that performs when everything else does not perform. And again, I go back to churches. Churches are like high net worth individuals. There are some that are bad, and they've got all kinds of debt, and they didn't think through it. But there are a lot that aren't, and those are the guys that I'm really concerned about.
You should introduce me to them.
Yes, but they don't take my call though.
So you're saying somebody who doesn't have close to $100,000 stored up somewhere that's liquid shouldn't even be listening to this conversation?
They should listen, but they should then set a meeting with us so that we can get them on the path to where what they're saying is actually applicable. at least in a meaningful sense.
I'd like to spend this last 10 minutes kind of going through, I guess the why. I think what we just talked about there was really helpful, and kind of talking about, even kind of getting into maybe some first principles on this side of thing. But I'm in Josiah's category. I put $1,000 in Bitcoin 3 years ago or whatever, and it's gone up,
And then down, and then up.
and then up, and
down,
I'm
then
super
up.
happy where I'm at right now. You're having a good week. You're happy.
I don't check the price.
But if so Josiah gets me to where I need my family's budget to be. Josiah gets me to where now I can work with Jim and Jordan. Just basically sell yourself. Sell me. Why should I call Jim now that I'm in a good position? Go.
Because gold from Genesis 2 forward is the stated by the Lord standard by which good names, wisdom, everything is judged. It's been part of what is beauty, what is truth, and what has been declared by Him to be good. And I don't care where they are relative to the cross, every man under the sun, every civilization, if I have gold, I can go to that civilization wherever it is, and I've got something to do. I may be having something to do with Bitcoin as well. It takes technology, and it's pretty close to being ubiquitous. But I'm just saying, if you looked at the difference between gold and Bitcoin, right now, until proven otherwise, what in terms of a risk profile, what I went long what I own with Bitcoin is the NASDAQ. Go look, if you overlay the two graphs on top of each other, I'm just taking NASDAQ risk. I'm not saying you're always going to. And as a matter of fact, this week,
Gold and Bitcoin are up while the stock market is going down.
It's actually, and Lord willing, it will continue.
The decoupling, hopefully.
Right, but it's got to do it over time.
Answer that in a practical way. So I got $50,000.
You've got $50,000. If you want an asset, if $50,000, I'd say, Gabe, let's take $5,000. We're going to buy silver and gold because you can buy a little bit more silver, and you can maybe buy some coins that if you're telling me, look, in case we go to credit controls or they close the banks or something like that, I want to have something in my pocket for my wife and children. Yeah, let's get some silver too. But now you got $5,000. You never have to think about it again, and now you go talk to Josiah.
So, but I'm doing is I'm foregoing certain cash that I don't have access to anymore to invest in gold.
Correct, because it's a.
But I already have my stuff figured out, right? So I can forego that cash in the short run.
It's core capital. And don't forget, it's liquid as water. Now ETFs are liquid. My argument against ETF is that I'm going to have a little bit wider bid offer spread. It's worth it to actually own it, as opposed to having the financial contract.
So I should.
That's biblical. To legitimately own the asset instead of owning a right attached to an asset.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm giving you $5,000. I keep it in gold for 2 years, 5 years.
Yeah, and that's something maybe you alluded to, Toby. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to be gold maxi like you are. I think you should always have some, but if gold rises and the Dow Jones falls to where I have a one-to-one relationship, I will then be on the phone to tell you, sell half of your gold position and get more involved with it. Now you can buy stocks at 6 times earnings and a 6% dividend. You don't have to have as much gold right now.
Implying that I could possibly solicit securities business, which I definitely can't do.
Of course
right
not.
here.
All right, same question. I got $50,000. I got my stuff taken care of. I'm financially stable now. What do you tell me to do with Bitcoin?
So you're saying you only have $50,000 for your whole net worth is $50,000?
No, I got my stuff right with him.
Okay,
You know,
cool.
I got Dave Ramsey savings already taken care of.
No.
You know,
No.
Oh, I would have been, and then
I know you love Dave.
I would have. I put the whole 50 grand
In gold.
and,
Okay.
and no, I put some in Bitcoin too.
Yeah.
I would maybe half and half.
Okay.
Maybe half and half.
Again, I'm the measure. I'd be just as measured, maybe even a little bit more measured. I would want to ask, how old is this individual? Because again, like if you're the younger you are, the higher risk tolerance you can have. Because again, your life is going to change in 100 different ways, and so the younger you are, the higher risk tolerance you can do, and so the more Bitcoin you can own. Again, it also depends on where you live. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but depending on where you are, what country you live in, what specific
Venezuela, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to want to own a higher percentage of Bitcoin because there's specific threats to you. Again, are you in church leadership? You know, are we acting on behalf of a church because there's specific threats that they're going to face that are unique? But again, you're going to as I mentioned, there are 21 million Bitcoin. Yeah. There's $61 million denominated millionaires in the world. If you have the means to get to one Bitcoin, and that can represent a smallish percentage of your net worth, then run, do not walk. Like that's how, because like this is only 1% of the world owns any Bitcoin. Everyone who has internet, which is like 5 billion people in the world, is incentivized to use Bitcoin once they understand it. And so, again, all things being equal, that's a great decision. Now, again, if you don't have that amount of money, then you can do something called daily cost averaging or like weekly cost averaging or whatever.
Not dollar cost averaging.
No, yeah, whatever. But you know, whatever it is you're operating, you buy a little bit every week or every month or whatever it is. And again, you can start with little and be faithful with your little. You know, buy what you can. Don't feel guilty about it that you can't buy a ton of it, and then just trust that it will grow.
So here's my problem with Bitcoin. Again, I'm an investor. I'm not. You know, but it's only been around 20 years. You know, so I mean, could something happen in 20 years where Bitcoin's back to $250 per Bitcoin?
So yeah, I mean, again, this is I'm
postulating,
yes,
but it's such a short run. Like I've seen gold for a long time. You know, I've seen, I have a mutual fund, retirement fund, and I've been in that since 2009 or something. So I've seen the consistency there.
Sure.
20 years is not enough for me to see consistency.
Yeah. Well, again, as we talked about, like stocks and all these other things, which he's not allowed to represent, like those have been around for 70 years. Like again, the only thing that has been around for
70.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like in the gold's case, it does have a track record. But again, what I would advocate is look at history. Like it's weird. You have the digital money guy talking about, hey, look at history. There's reasons why gold was able to be co-opted the way that it was. There's specific reasons and characteristics that gold has that lend itself towards centralization, that lend itself towards people not wanting to hold it. And then when they do give up custody in the name of putting it in a building with thick walls protected by guys with guns, that the physicality of gold becomes a liability. And so there's characteristics that Bitcoin has that make it like superior to gold in these certain respects, that irrespective of the timeline, like these things, or how long it's been around, the characteristics of Bitcoin are such that, again, independently of that, it still makes sense for it to, people to own it.
And you're still you're thinking of Bitcoin though, and describing this as you're saying long term, it is a secure protection of value.
So you can't change the characteristics of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like, and this is like a technical explanation you could go through. But like again, one of the other ways that gold gets co-opted is when you buy it. The question is, how do you know that what you're buying actually is gold and isn't like a bar that is like 40% tungsten at the middle of it, and then it's actual gold wrapped around it? You have to like do things like
touchstone,
like X-ray it and do kind of, there's tests that you can do, but there's an open question when you're operating with cash. It could be counterfeit cash, or gold. It could be counterfeit gold. Yeah. And so with Bitcoin, it's very cheap and easy to verify whether or not the thing that you're operating with is the actual underlying Bitcoin. So again, that's one example of ways that you can verify and use it. So again, all of these things have their place and they're good, and especially investing in companies is great. Like you ought to take seriously, especially if you, again, are in a place where you have you've been responsible, you're being a good steward, and trying to take seriously the scriptural commands to care for the needs of your immediate family, you ought to look around at people in your church or your family or whatever and look for ways that you can invest in them, not just with money, but also with your time and also with wise counsel and all these kind of things. That you have more currencies at your disposal that you'll give an account to God for than just the money that is in your hands.
So let me push back some. Here's my pushback. The trouble with the short-term existence of Bitcoin is that there was technology behind it, and to the extent that we have to be respectful of technology, I can't imagine what it is, whether it's quantum computing or whatever it is. Something might occur that would break the Bitcoin code. I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, but I will say tangentially, look at Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London will insure a building with guys with guns, but they're not going to insure Bitcoin.
I love that you just mentioned this. One of my friends actually found a company called Anchor Watch, which has coverage from Lloyd's of London as of late last year.
But who's Anchor Watch?
So that's the company that has the coverage to get insurance on your Bitcoin holdings.
So Anchor Watch is just an insurance company?
So they are a company that helps provide insurance for Bitcoin. Has coverage from Lloyd's of London.
Okay, all right. So
again, that's a relatively novel thing, so I don't blame you for it.
Right. And maybe that's where they're going. And the other pushback is this, and I don't know where the IRS is on this right now, and hopefully Trump gets rid of them.
Hopefully
right now, but the question right now is how, and this is my accountant asking me, because I have cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. How much of those transactions did you do this year? There is no question about gold or silver. There's not the opening salvo. We've got the spotlight on it.
I'm sorry. I explain that one more time for me.
I'm just saying that IRS is asking the upfront question: did you do cryptocurrency transactions this year?
And they don't do that about gold. You're saying
it's almost like asking, so what's valuable in your house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're planning something.
Yes.
Yeah. Just say, I wanted to hear Gabe's got $50,000. You're basically saying diversify it. Some in Bitcoin, some in what are you telling Gabe to do with his $50K?
My hands are relatively tied on that particular question.
Okay.
So I would say after sitting down with him, hypothetically, we walk through his budget, we optimize everything, we build up his savings so that he has enough liquid assets to weather most storms, sort of non-catastrophic insurance realm stuff. He's got everything that can take care of the realm before insurance. And then we get his insurance sorted as well. He's got $50,000 to play with. Great. Let's actually deploy it. If he's already got his hedges, great. Now he needs to start taking dominion and growing that wealth. And there's a number of ways to do that, but we need to take into account time horizon, risk tolerance, moral considerations, age, location, like the whole 9 yards here, and do a proper suitability workup, which is why bald radio talk show hosts, not that any of you guys fit that bill, specifically ones that invest in real estate in Nashville, those kinds of guys who tell everyone to do one type of thing are meaningfully hurting their viewers, are meaningfully hurting the church.
What do they tell them to do?
Well, generally open up a Roth IRA and then put it in mutual funds that apparently always do 10 to 12% returns year over year without fail. But if you want to actually get access to those, you need to talk to a smart investor who pay that guy for leads.
And that's a terrible idea.
That's a terrible idea.
What? Explain.
Because if you give blanket advice, it's going to help the median American, and precisely 0 Americans are actually the median American. Or the average American, we might say. So when you give a blanket advice, it ends up being a wet blanket, and the church ends up not making any money. So if you're trying to actually make money and deploy your capital that you have in your unique situation, you should talk to someone who knows what they're doing. And there is a non-small learning curve involved in both Bitcoin and other assets that I can't specify. Whereas with gold, it's very simple. Right, so if you're looking for something simple, we're talking like budgeting and gold. If you're talking about something that's more sophisticated, we're going to get more sophisticated, which is going to require a longer conversation than an hour-long podcast.
Okay, fine.
All right, website where people can find you.
www.reformed.money. A website I can't believe was available, but in
Money.
a real sense can absolutely
Are you
believe
really
was still
surprised that the
available.
Reform community doesn't have that address?
Right? It's us.
Reform.money.
It was $5.
Jim, what's your
Okay.
website? Where can people, if they wanted to buy gold or understand this better?
www.alpspmg.com. ALPSPMG.com.
Isn't there a cross politic or something connected to that?
It sure is.
that's what I thought.
Slash cross politics.
I love my brothers at Cross
you
Politics.
go.
Seriously, any business we do that comes from Cross Politic, I share the revenue with you guys. So it's,
I'm a little favorable towards gold, just to let y'all know that right now. Jordan.
Yeah, our website is tgfb.com, as in thank God for Bitcoin.com. tgfb.com.
The only non-corporate member up here.
That's true. That's
I
true.
haven't sold out. I haven't sold out.
Maybe you really don't want to help people. That's how I feel.
So I'm gonna walk around. I'm gonna do some questions. So if anybody got any questions, raise your hand. I'll walk around, bring the mic to you.
Marcus, I knew
Sorry,
he had a
Marcus.
question.
Marcus coming right here.
Y'all get out my shop quickly. That's what he's questioning.
I got a question for the Bitcoin guy, because Gary North would say that money has a practical value outside of money. So like a chicken, you can use the feathers or the eggs, or gold, you can do jewelry or design or anything like that.
Productive asset.
So what is the practical use of Bitcoin out, like when it's in your wallet? Like what's the practical benefit of it?
And Gary North is dead, so you better be careful what you say about him.
Gary North has never been more alive. I just want to defend him.
All right. Praise God.
What's he gonna do? Respond?
So
The
now
ghost
even more
of Gary
respect.
North.
Even more respect for Gary on his name. Put some respect on it.
All right, so fun story, and then I'll answer your question. So when we published Thank God for Bitcoin, one of the books that really impacted us was Honest Money by Gary North. So a lot of our book is rephrasing a lot of what Gary said, at least in part. And so we reached out to Gary and asked him to write the foreword for our book.
No.
And Gary, his opinion of Bitcoin, especially in the beginning, he had his eyes on it since the beginning, but he just said the volatility is, quote, crippling. And so he basically told us to kick rocks and said he wanted nothing to do with us. And so when he went to be with the Lord, again, a lot of what Bitcoin is grounded in the same principles that gold is. And so when people find out that his book was so influential on us, they ask us, they're like, well, was Gary North a Bitcoiner? And my answer has become, he is now. But in terms of the utility of Bitcoin, so again, I can memorize a 12-word seed phrase and cross any border in the world and take that value with me in ways that are impossible with any other asset. So again, that's not super important, at least to most Americans, although there are many Americans who are being oppressed for either their faith or their political leanings or whatever, for whom, including the Canadian truckers.
I was thinking about
I was just thinking about that.
So I had the privilege to interview BJ Dichter, who is the spokesperson of the Canadian trucker protest. They had people donate millions of dollars to them from all over the world. And the Canadian government declared them enemies of the state, confiscated all that money, and confiscated their own personal bank accounts. And to BJ's own admittance, he's like, the only money that we were able to actually custody and get to the truckers was the $900,000 worth of Bitcoin. So the question is, how valuable is it to have for people to have money that a government can't take from you?
ETFs can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. True. So I mean, what is the value of that? To them, it was priceless. It was the only money that they could access. So again, a lot of this depends on situations, and I could give you a whole bunch of other uses as well, but that's one meaningful one.
Wow. Next, anybody? Over here.
So is there a feasible, actually possible way, if the government was so inclined, to take the dollar and change it from a fiat currency back to a gold-based currency?
Yes.
Yes, that I think is what Scott Bessent is advising Trump. Trump came with the idea that we make America great again. How do we get back there? How do we stop all these orcs from doing what they've been doing? And one of the answers is get us back to turn the dollar back into something that's trustworthy. And that can be certainly has Bitcoin's not going to have a role with that.
Yeah, the tricky thing is, so again, in some sense, it's a will problem. And will problems are very difficult to solve, like because there's incentives.
You mean like having the will to do it?
Correct. Yeah. So,
Or
again,
having a will and trust in place because of what's going to happen to you if you don't.
exactly.
That's kind of what I was wondering.
But what would that do to Bitcoin though?
So
Bitcoin will be part of it.
yeah, that. So again, so this isn't hypothetical. Okay, so the United States currently holds a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Like they just announced we're doing this, and they announced that we're going to find. Trump charged these guys, what's his name, Lutnick and Besant, to find budget-neutral ways to accumulate more Bitcoin. So what that means is you can, whether that's revaluing the gold at a higher, like its actual market value, and then selling some to buy Bitcoin. That's one thing that's been thrown out there. There's 100 ways in which they can do this, and they've actually been charged with doing this. So this is happening right now. Like the government, Trump has made a goal he wants. And imagine, I know you can't imagine Trump saying something like this, but he said, I want to be the biggest holder and the Bitcoin holder in all the world. Like he doesn't want China to hold more Bitcoin than the United States. So he sees this and wants this to happen. So again, this is a real thing that's already being discussed. We don't have to speculate on whether or not this is something that the United States isn't actually doing. So,
Any last questions? Uh-oh. Jonathan's getting in here. Uh-oh.
Yeah, could you guys talk a little bit about the trade-offs between nation-state adoption and individual adoption, and also how important it is for these things to be a medium of exchange in order to sort of supplement their use as a store of value?
I would say the first answer I would tell you is that whether it's a government or an individual or a church, when you have a core capital in the form of gold and Bitcoin, then you are in the position of strength. You don't have all your assets that are in the financial system. You actually keep them independent of that financial system. Yeah, in a gold's case, you'll have to have my partners in Texas, in the little town of Shiner, Texas. That's where the vault is. But you're independent. They're not. We don't lend against that gold. We don't do anything. It's totally yours. So what a country is doing when it's saying we're going to stop playing the games, and we will make make the dollar great again, right? Because it can be trusted again. Why can it be trusted? Because what is ultimately behind it is in gold's case, since God created the world, it has been the store of value, and that is we can trust that. And what's coming is Bitcoin as well as a part of that. But it's independence, and it's your ability to face a corrupt financial system, and you call the shots, not them. We have relationships with two Texas banks, and CIBC, which is a $1 trillion Canadian bank. The U.S. subsidiary was LaSalle Bank out of Chicago. They will now, if a church, a high net worth individual, whatever the worth is, if you have gold in our vault, they will lend against that gold as if you have a deposit with them. But again, I go back to the whole key to this is don't let the financial system have every single penny of your capital, especially not your core capital. But now it doesn't have to sit there dead, quote unquote, just paying a fee for the vaulting. Now you can use it and go, hey, bank A, B, C, or D, I want to build a house, or I'm going to expand my business, or I'm going to do what? Great. And we'll act as if that gold is in our vault, even though it isn't. And the only way you lose your gold is if you default on the loan. So that's really exciting stuff.
Interesting.
Either of you guys want to speak?
Yeah, I mean the one thing that I say. So the idea of a risk-free return is a lie. Okay, and so that is
it's another form of theft.
Yeah, it is. And so that's one thing. Now, to your point, I believe what you asked is like how important is demand to like use Bitcoin? How important is the medium of exchange versus store of value? And I would say again, these are not enemies. These are two arms on the same body. And so again, like the key component is demand. So like people using Bitcoin will follow from them valuing Bitcoin. So the store of value, again, this is a whole debate we can get into, and that different economists have debated, but like my understanding would be that things start as a store of value, they become a medium of exchange, and then once enough people are using them, then they become the thing by which you denominate everything else. And so but this is a really important thing, because there's been some people here who have like tried to, I wouldn't say demonize, but have like in some way sort demonize the idea of saving as if it's now dead capital. Okay, this is just not true. Saving money is using money. In the same way, again, if we return to the illustration of children, okay, effective, if you have children, they're useless for a meaningful period of time. But that's actually a wicked way. That is if we look at the disciples, that's how they looked at children. And Jesus rebuked this attitude over and over again. So saving Bitcoin is preparing to deploy. You're basically investing in something with a plan to use it at some future date. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Like if we were to look at agriculture and put that expectation on agriculture, you wouldn't be able to make heads or tails of what they were even saying, because this is a natural part of the process. You plant the seed and then you have to wait. This is totally normal. This is not ungodly or anything. This is how God has designed the world to function.
Right. And to add to that, it's effectively a form of insurance. When you hold capital, you are mitigating risk. So I can pay for a thing without having to go into debt because I have the money. And risk costs money. There's a whole series of industries about risk mitigation. That's the whole insurance industry as a whole, is you pay me money so that I mitigate your risk for something catastrophic to happen. So you holding your capital, even if it is in dollars and inflating at 3% per year, is actually a better use of those dollars as just pure risk mitigation rather than deploying that capital hoping to earn a 10 to 15% return somewhere. It's way more valuable in your own pocket up to a point. After you've got you're self-insured up to a degree, now is the time to deploy capital, but not before, because it's more valuable in your own pocket for a time.
And the last thing I would add is, like, with this, like, the overall goal, like, you see, I can't remember which parable it is, but you have basically the point of money. You can turn unrighteous wealth into the eternal souls of men. Like, this is an insane opportunity that God has given us, where we can basically invest in like missionaries and we can invest in gospel ministry, and we can take this thing, even dirty fiat, and we can basically turn it into eternal souls who will come to us one day and say, it was because of your generosity that I am standing here, humanly speaking. Like, that is a staggering thing, that we can turn unrighteous wealth into friends for God. Like that, I mean, that's astounding, the opportunity that we have.
And given that, go make money. Stop retreating from the world and pretending
Amen.
like you waiting on God's calling for your life is somehow righteous. You need to go out there and make some money. Go out there, do something productive, make something good and true and beautiful, and get another person to pay for it. So that we can actually earn that capital, accrue that capital, grow that capital, and then deploy that capital for the saving of souls.
Amen.
That's good.
Amen.
I wanted to ask real quick, last thing.
Okay.
For me, just real quickly from each of you, what's one resource, a book or something like that you'd say, read this, go buy this, read this. This will help you grow in your understanding of how to be a productive Christian and take dominion.
Besides this show.
Go.
If I could first, because you used the right word. Productive Christians in an Age of Guilt Manipulators
Yes.
by David Chilton.
That's right.
That's a good one.
He did end up apostatizing, but that book, prior to his embracing of full preterism, was phenomenal.
Jordan?
Yeah, so I will surprise folks. So basically, our book, Thank God for Bitcoin, is like a good intro to these topics. But even if you just want a basic thing of understanding money, I'm going to shock the world. Go read Honest Money by Gary North. It's written at a 9th or 10th grade level. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, very good.
Same. Honest money.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Before Knox closes us out, I have a stack of our magazines, our most recent issue over there on school wars. You can just pick it up. It's free. Take it with you. A bunch of authors written in it. Our conference, our Fight Laugh Feast conference is in Nashville, October 16th through the 18th in Nashville, and the topic is school wars at our conference.
And it actually ties really well to what you've been saying, Jordan, but it's all about the value of kids. It's all about why the battle for our children is a central part of our building wealth and being productive Christians.
Christians lost America because we gave our kids away. We didn't see the value in raising our own kids. We didn't see the value in discipling our own kids. We didn't see the value in the discipleship, which includes education.
Yeah.
We gave our kids to the world to be discipled and educated, and that's how we lost America.
So go to fightmyfeast.com, register today. We want to pack the place out.
It's the best conference we're ever going to have. So I'm looking forward to it.
Ever?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
One of the most important conferences up until this point. I'll say that about all the conferences.
Knox closes out, and then we'll end with the doxology.
Hey,
Okay.
thank you guys for coming. Appreciate you guys for spending your evening
Thank you,
with us.
everybody.
I want to
Thank
give
you
these
for
guys
being
a hand for coming in town. They came in town, you flew in town. So thank you guys for being here. Give these guys a hand real quick.
Kentucky, Florida.
Thank you guys to Marcus and Cody. Appreciate you guys.
Refuge.
Let's go get your cigars and come hang out with some good guys. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Yeah. Until next time, look out with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. Thank you guys.
Toby. Let's stand and sing doxology.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him.